everyone, as you can see, we've got the original 289 out of the 67 Mustang. We're getting ready to put that 306 in here. And if you want to see us pull that 289 out, well, go check out Wasted Talents Fabrications live stream from March 26th. We do it right there in that stream. All right, let's get started. Just a reminder why we're doing all this is we're trying to get this thing together so we can head to Arkansas and partake in that LSV build. Yeah, that's the LS going in the Volvo. Now there's some other channels I'd like you to check out, and we're going to get back on the 306, but while we're moving over there, go check out JustMoparJoe. He's another guy taking part. The 289 is out. You can see our T5 sitting down there. I might change the exhaust up a little bit. Show you that in a minute. And come over here. There's that original 289 that we pulled out. Went pretty well. As I said, you can check that out on Wasted Talent Fabrications live stream for March 26th. And there's the 306 that's going in. Now, I did mention we might be changing the exhaust out. We'll see how much time we have, but that's what's hiding in this box. Oh yeah. Look at that. There's some nice new pipes. We've got a couple options. We've got some long tubes here that we might try out. And we also have some shorties around here someplace. There they are. We might try those out. All right, let's get to getting this 306 in the car. Now that we've done our check with the plasticine and stuff, we got to talk about what we got to do next. We got our valves all sorted out. We got the clearances checked. But in doing that process, you might have some residual underneath the valve. I'll show you what I mean. When you look into the intake port, we can see that there's a little plasticine in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the valve spring apart, take the valve out, and then we'll see what we got. And we'll check both the intake and the exhaust. We only did it on the one cylinder for that reason, because we don't want to take this whole head apart and clean out each and every one of these. So you're going to need a valve spring compressor. We're going to pop our valve spring out. And look at that. That's why we take it apart. Just clean all that up and then we'll put it back together. All my bolts sitting here for the head. We've got the head cleaned up. We got the gasket, the new gasket underneath. Got the bolts and the washer. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that you got to make sure that the chamfer, so that beveled edge on the washer right there, see this side's flat. That goes to the head. That side has a chamfer in it that goes to the bolt, and the reason being is you want the radius of the bolt, it gives it a relief. So ARP, when you say you put these in, you're going to use the lubricant under the head of the bolt and the washer, and then we're going to use a thread sealer on the threads because these go into water passages. So I'm going to set up and do all that, and we'll get this thing torqued down. I'm going to do 3 steps. I'm going to do a spiral pattern, 3 steps. Probably start with a low setting like 25 or 30 foot-pounds. Then we're going to bump it up to about 45, 50 foot-pounds, and then the final torque is 70. So that's how we're going to torque this down. So starting in this type of pattern. It should be good. Just make sure you have thread sealer and you get the lubricant under the heads of the bolts. I'm going to recommend, so you assemble your bolt and your washer. So we got it under the head. Yes, this is a messy job. Put it on. There we go. And then you put your thread sealer on. Make sure you slide your washer on your bolt first. There we go. Nice and messy. Okay, so there you go. We've got this head all torqued down. Just going to clean it up and move on to the next one. And you might be asking yourself why I'm taking this other head off. It's because I haven't checked under here and I want to make sure it's got the proper gasket, everything's clean. So it's always good. One last look. Well, that's looking pretty clean. All right, let's talk rocker studs and guide plates. If you're using the guide plates, you're going to need a hardened push rod, chrome moly or something like that, which is what we have. So you also see there's a fair bit of room in this guide plate. Slops around. It can move in and out like that. There's a left and a right side. Now the reason for that is you want your push rod to be able to, if these plates are over too far, it's going to side load it. We don't want to side load it. We want to line everything up so that the rocker and the push rod are in nice alignment. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. We'll use this guy here. Drop our push rod down. Well, the other thing is when we permanently install these, we're going to use some thread sealant on these. We're going to torque them to about, I think, 50 to 55 as AFR recommends for the 3/8 rocker studs. So we're just going to leave that a little bit loose right now. Have your rocker here. Now let's get in a little bit closer, shall we? Okay, so I've exaggerated this for video purposes. You can see if we got our plate pushed over too much, our rocker is not lined up on that valve tip at all. So we need to space out our plate to the correct, so that the rocker is centered up on our valve tip. And if you want to use the felt and you can just give it a little wiggle back and forth, you'll know if it's where it's supposed to be. The other thing that you want to look at is if the balls of the push rod are properly aligned and in the rocker. Now when you go to permanently install these rocker studs, make sure you get some sealant on there. Now you're going to have some patience with this process. It could take you a couple hours to get all these things lined up properly, so take your time. It's not the place to rush. You can see we've got our roller is centered on our valve stem. You can see our push rod is centered between the guide. It's sitting nicely in the cup of the rocker. And down here you can see that we're nicely in the cup of the lifter. There's no side loading going on, so we're going to be good to torque that one down. And once you torque it, you're going to want to recheck it. So now that we have kind of that Cyril lash, we're going to get a little wiggle test. There you go. It stays pretty centered. Should be fine with that. Okay, we're installing this balancer from Summit Racing, and it's part number SUM-163302. Now there's a couple things about this balancer. The first one has to do with the water pump. And what you'll find is that you may run into some problems with this lug right here. So you're going to have to sand it down. Now we clearance stars, so it should be good, but we might have to take a little bit more off once we get the balancer seated. We'll take a look. But you can see right there, we took a lot of that down and smoothed it out a bit, so we should have some sufficient clearance. And we look pretty good. We'll know for sure once we get everything bolted up. The other thing is there's a couple ways to install this. Now my preferred method, if you have it, is to use the balancer install tool. If you don't have access to one or you're in a pinch, you can heat these up in an oven for about 15 minutes at 250 and then quickly put it on. Make sure you got some good gloves on, and then you have to quickly kind of beat it on there with a block of wood and a hammer or a piece of aluminum or something like that. But that's the two ways you can get this balancer on. And that's right in the instructions, so I'm not telling you something that's not in the instructions. All right, let's carry on, get this installed. One thing I'd like to point out is make sure you do your quality control check. There we have our push rod. You can see down the center of that one, nice and clean and clear, brand new push rod. Now let's take a look at this one. You can see there's a little trash in there blocking it partially. So that's why you want to make sure you blow all these out, clean them out really good, check each one, and this is a brand new push rod too. So do your quality control checks before putting everything together. Don't just assume it's good. Right now we're working on setting up the rockers. We've adjusted all our guide plates so that our push rods are centered, and now we're setting the lash. We've already done the first cylinder, and we've done this cylinder here, number 2, on the intake valve. So now we're going to move on to the exhaust valve, and what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it so the intake valve comes to its full open, and then we're going to set the exhaust valve. And we're just going to work our way down the line and then start on the other side. So let's do one of those. Okay, you can see that the valve's opening, and there it's pretty much peak, and this guy's got lots of slop now. That's exactly what we want. So I prefer the method of lifting the push rod up and down, not twirling it. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly turn this down until we have no play left. There we go, that's our back. We got our lash out of there, and then you're going to give it half a turn. We're going to lock it down. Done. And we're just going to continue on doing that with the rest of these. Okay, we're about to put the flywheel on, but just make sure you put some red thread sealer on your bolts and torque those down to about 70 to 80 foot-pounds. Pro tip for all you out there, don't do what I did, and make sure you remember your transmission spacer and your starter mount. Okay, we got that 306 sitting in the car, and we're getting there. The only problem is, it's not a big block, but if you do want to see some big block action, go check out BigBlock 402. He's another guy taking part in the build, so give him a view. Well, we're getting close to firing this up. As you can see, we've got that marked. It's 0, and we got it lined up. Everything's lined up good. Now, we're going to prime our oil system before dropping the distributor in, and we're doing exactly what you shouldn't do, but we can't find our priming tool, so we've taken a 1/4 inch deep socket, 1/4 inch drive, taped it to an extension, and that will get the job done, but we're just going to be very careful we don't drop it in there. So wish us luck. Now, one advantage of doing it this way is we just have to use our 1/4 inch bit in our drill. Now remember, on the Fords, they turn counterclockwise. Oh, there we go. You can feel the pressure build. Well, we got oil pressure. Well, we're going to do that a little bit longer. We're going to put this on the drill setting so it doesn't ratchet while we're building pressure, and then we're just going to let her go for a little bit. Make sure everything's nice and lubed up before we put the distributor in and crank her up. Okay, one thing I want to point out about this is the 289 uses a different firing order than our 302 does. So we're going to have to take our cap apart and reorganize the ignition wires. So just keep that in mind if you're doing something like this, that don't plan on dropping this back in and think your engine's going to run correctly because you just changed your firing order.
Dependent on the camshaft. So if you get a comp cams, the prefix 31 dash series of cams is the old firing order, the 1542 firing order.
Yeah.
If you get the 35 dash prefix, that's the newer, or the 351 Windsor 302 HO firing order. So it's a different firing order, and you just need to be aware of that.
You can see #1 cylinder, it's over here. We've got, I'm going to set it up so that we point at #1. And remember, this turns counterclockwise on the Fords, so we're going to set up our next one firing over here. So right now we're set at #1, we're still at top dead center. Now we're going to set up our cap. We'll walk you through that. So you can see on the cap it's got 2 dowel pins here. That only allows the cap to go on one way. I'll show you what I mean by that. The cap is on correctly. You can see it sits down nicely. If we flip it around 180, you can see there's a gap on this side. It won't go down. So that's how you know you got it right. So once you have that all figured out, we're going to put our cap on. We're going to figure out which one we're pointing at, which should be pretty close to this one here. We're kind of in between the two. So we can turn it to point at that one, and then we're good. So that's what we're going to do. This thing likes about 15 degrees timing, static timing. So what we did is we set the balancer down there. Can't see it that well, but there it is. We set that up to 15 degrees, and then we pointed the rotor at firing that cylinder. We're just moments away from trying to fire this thing up for the first time with that new 306 in there. Don't know what's going to happen, but you'll be the first to see it. We just got to organize a few more things, put some coolant in here. And while we're doing that, and speaking of organizing, why don't you go check out the guy that organized the LSVOLVO build? That would be Stuff with Cleatus. Check out his channel. He's got some cool stuff on there. All right, we're gonna get back to it. We'll catch you on the other side. The last thing we have to do on this thing before we hit the key and try to fire it up is we gotta tell the sniper system what we have. Numbers, cylinders is still correct. Engine displacement, however, that's now a 306. Okay, we've got our 306 displacement. We're going to go street strip cam now. Give it a save. So there you go. 8 cylinders, 306, street strip. So pretty basic information that you got to put in. We're going to have to cycle the key, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so let's see what we've got without completely blowing the budget. And speaking of budgets, why not check out our sponsor for the LSVOLVO build, Bubba Ayers. All right, Let's see what happens. Okay, we're going to crank it over with the ignition disabled and make sure everything cranks nice. And if that goes well, then we're going to hook up the ignition and see what happens. Go ahead, Chris. It's in neutral. Okay, let's enable the ignition.
Now, when you say light off,
Speaking of which, you got a fire extinguisher?
take those fuel lines down real good.
Well, I'm going to do a leak check in a second here. Nothing there. Nothing there. Connected. Okay, I think we're good to go. Give it a shot.
Ready?
You might recall from, I think it was episode 33, it was a few episodes ago, that we were setting out to fix a certain problem with this car, and that was that intake leak, where we're going to finally tackle that leaky intake manifold. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to replace the engine. And I'm happy to say it's accomplished. Stay tuned on the channel for more ideas on how to turn a $50 repair into a $5,000 repair. Hey, Chris? Yeah. See you later, everyone.